Good. How are you? It was good to be back in there today. And it's a slow ramp up. We didn't have to go outside onto the field. The next 4 days, we're going to be out on the field, and it's going to be underway. So it's going to be fun.
So let me ask you. Yeah, it will be fun. I think. Let me ask you then. On the outset, when you found out this morning, I think Ian Rappaport was the first to report that he was hearing that Brandon Aiyuk would report to training camp, and I guess we'll find out tomorrow if he practices. I think everybody's guess is no. That we're looking at the hold in. But was it a surprise to you that he showed up?
I think it's mildly surprising. On one hand, the Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa situations both saw those guys hold out at the start of training camp. I know that Samuel signed his contract a couple days in. But on the other hand, the 49ers are obviously in the driver's seat here, and they have the leverage. Ayuk is already under contract, and it all means that he would stand to be fined $40,000 per day. And it'd be up to the 49ers to forgive those fines. And if they weren't in the mood to forgive those fines, it'd be too bad. So I think that ultimately, this is a sign of the team having the upper hand here. And it also might be a sign that talks are progressing in a positive fashion.
What's I'm wondering what the worst case is, David. Could he sit out? I wouldn't think he would, but could he sit out the year until the point where he has to come back? I think it was like week 12 or 13, something like that. You think that's even on the table? Is that even a possibility?
Technically, it is a possibility, but I think that would just hurt Brandon Aiyuk because he is in a contract year until he isn't, right? Until he signs a new contract, this is a contract year. And what do you need in a contract year to make the most money possible for yourself after that? You need numbers, and to put up numbers, A, you need to play, but B, you need to get ready to play. You need to develop your quarterback, and that happens in training camp. So, everything incentive-wise says Brandon Aiyuk needs to show up at least by week 1, but even before then, because this kind of stuff is tied to what happens during the regular season. So while that's technically possible, I just think that this is in a position that really encourages Brandon Aiyuk to show up.
What's the situation that makes the 49ers desperate?
In this situation?
Yeah, what could play out that makes them go, you know what, let's just get that. We've got to pay him what he needs or what he's asking.
I think the only thing that could possibly happen, and it's not guaranteed to happen, is that he doesn't show up. Week 1 hits, and then week 2 passes, week 3 passes, and their offense is really struggling without Brandon Aiyuk. Because that's when Aiyuk can say, look what it looks like without me. Okay, now pay me my money, right? But if you're Brandon Aiyuk, you can't count on that happening because this is an offense with Purdy, with Christian McCaffrey, with George Kittle, with Deebo Samuel. I mean, I could go through the list. I mean, this is a really loaded offense even without him. Of course they're better with him, but it's not like the Nick Bosa situation last year where Nick Bosa took that all the way up until, Wednesday or Thursday of week 1. And without Nick Bosa, that defense would not have been a good defense last year. I mean, they slipped to number 10 even with him. So I think that the leverage situation is just very different between the Brandon Aiyuk situation and the Nick Bosa situation.
Is there a chance they might sign him to a 1-year deal, give him a little more money, and just kind of table this until next year?
John Lynch didn't rule anything out, but I do think it's in the 49ers' interest to give Brandon Aiyuk more money over a longer period of time. And I also think it's in Brandon Ayuk's interest to have more financial security now, because the longer they make this contract, the more they can mess with the numbers, right, against the cap. And this is a flow control, and unused cap space moves over from year to year. You got to think in the big picture because that Brock Purdy contract is coming up in 2025.
Got it.
Talking to David Lombardi here on the UMA guest line. Covers the 49ers for The Athletic. Does a great job. You had an article out last week about the 3 potential outcomes of what could happen with Brandon Aiyuk. And today, John Lynch would not say unequivocally like he did last year, Brandon Aiyuk will not be traded the same way he did about Nick Bosa, though that to me still seems like the least likely of scenarios. Where are you on the 3 scenarios and on John's comments today?
Yeah, they've always, except for that Bosa situation, they've always had the no absolutes line, right? I think he said no absolutes today.
That's right.
They've kept they've kept the door open to all possibilities. I think they're being honest. They're saying, hey, if we're absolutely blown away by an offer, of course we're going to try to make our team better. But if you look at this rationally, what possible offer could the 49ers get? That's realistic. We're not playing Madden here. That's realistic. That could make their team better for 2024. And I don't think such a realistic offer exists. And I don't think John Lynch thinks that it exists either. Now, Nick Bosa was the exceptional circumstance of no, we're not trading him because he's Nick Bosa. And I think everybody has seen how important he is to that defense.
If the Niners, and let's take injury out of the equation just for the sake of the discussion, who fits the 49ers better? Debo, who's more of a weapon than a receiver, or Aiyuk, who's a more polished receiver, a better receiver, but not the weapon Debo is? Which one? I think they complement each other beautifully, but if you had to take one, and forget about injuries being a factor, who do you go with for this offense?
I think you just said it. They complement each other. They're completely different types of players. They might both be titled receivers, but that's where the similarities stop. Brandon Aiyuk is who you want on your team to beat man coverage. He's also a really good blocker. You can't forget about that. But he's your typical X receiver. He's going to beat man coverage. Deebo Samuel is one of the most unique players in NFL history. The yards after the catch that he's amassed, actually, since they started tracking this, I think it's been about 22 years. Nobody has come close to averaging the yards after catch.
Really? Wow.
Attack as a receiver. We haven't seen, this type of body at that position. So that's great for the 49ers, but Brandon Aiyuk serves a completely different purpose. And I think that to have the number one offense, to have a team that is a Super Bowl favorite, which they are, and they're favored in all 17 of their games, you want to have both of those skill sets on your offense, because that's the beauty of what Kyle Shanahan is able to do now. You also can add Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle into the mix, but the beauty is that you have these differing skill sets that complement each other. So if a defense tries to shut one of them down, or if a defense is particularly good at taking away, man separation, well, then you have a bulldozer like Deebo Samuel to come in and do his thing, or vice versa. If they're particularly focused on taking out Debo, well, then you have Brandon Aiyuk doing his thing against man coverage.
That being said, they complement each other so well. Is there any reason to believe whatsoever that in 2 years they'll both be on the 49ers?
Absolutely, there's reason to believe that.
Okay.
Now, is it going to be challenging? Of course, but this is not a team that's in the business of letting really good players go. And say Deebo Samuel puts up an excellent year this year. He's still under contract for 2 more years. I think the 49ers would be crazy to not extend him, or they'd be crazy definitely to just let him walk for nothing. Okay. I don't think that they would be very interested in doing that. Say that they win the Super Bowl this year, then you're going to want to keep that group of players together. And even if they don't, they're still very, very good. You're still going to want to make sure that you sustain that level of talent on your team, especially when you see how it works together. Now, the one way that I would see one of these two guys not being on the team is if you saw it with Eric Armstead, who was a really good player for the 49ers, but the contract started to become very inefficient for the team because he had missed 13 games over 2 seasons. But if Deebo Samuel plays this entire season and is as effective as he's been in the past for the 49ers, then and history shows us that they've done whatever they can do to keep superstars on this roster.
If Aiyuk were to be traded, is the situation similar to that of when they traded DeForest Buckner, where whoever they move him to is just going to have to lock him up, and so it's going to limit the number of teams in which you could trade him to?
So can you repeat that?
If you were to trade Brandon Aiyuk, I said, is it similar to that of like DeForest Buckner, where he's got to get, he still wants that contract. Whoever trades for him would have to sign him and have the money to do so, which is going to limit the potential number of trade partners, correct?
Probably, but first and foremost, the only way that they trade Brandon Aiyuk is if they get a massive return for him. That's the only way that they would be incentivized to move him, and a return that would make them better this year. That's the first condition that would have to be satisfied, and that in and of itself, I think, would narrow down any prospective list of teams that could be suitors for Brandon Aiyuk.
Just to move on to some other action, some other players. Talking to Dave Lombardi of The Athletic. Pearsall, what's the prognosis with the hamstring?
So that he herded away from the team facility, which is why he's on NFI, non-football injury list, instead of
Okay.
PUP. That's just a designation that you make depending on where the injury occurred. So it's probably during one of his workouts in Arizona. But they're only expecting him to miss the first block of training camp practices, which is what I
Okay.
just mentioned, the Wednesday through Saturday. So I'd expect to see him maybe at the soonest on Monday out on the practice field.
Okay, got it. And where do you think the quarterback market's going to go? Because we were laughing yesterday, David. We were like, we thought not Aiyuk, but Purdy was going to get between 40 and 45. I was like, yeah. If he has a year like he had last year, forget that number. I mean, I don't know what Love's going to end up getting. I don't know what Prescott's going to end up getting. But do you see any end in sight to this quarterback market?
As long as the game is evolving the way that it's evolved, and with the rules really reinforcing the importance of that quarterback position, and the salary cap also continues to rise, as long as those two things continue happening, then I think the market's going to continue dictating for an increase at that quarterback position. So you asked me where I think it's headed. Well, it's headed very fast to the $60 million mark.
Yep.
And Brock Purdy might be the first one with a $60 million contract annually, the annual worth, or he might be the second or third guy there. But I think by the time that he signs, that's where the market's going to be. And assuming he continues on the trajectory that he's been on, that's going to be his worth. The worth is going to be the top of the market, because that's just how it works with these quarterback deals. So, yeah, it has gone crazy, but I think it has reflected how important that position is, because look at leverage. We talk about Nick Bosa and leverage when he had his holdout. The 49ers really needed him on the team. You look at Brandon Aiyuk, and obviously there's a little bit less leverage in this situation for Brandon Aiyuk. Imagine if Brock Purdy threatened to hold out.
Yeah.
He would have all the leverage, right? Because you couldn't operate without the quarterback on your team. We've seen what the 49ers look like when without Brock Purdy. That was the NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's why these quarterbacks are getting all that money, because they are that important on the field.
Could have used him in that title game. Yeah, could have.
Yeah.
Would have been nice to have Brock Purdy. David, great to catch up with you, man. A start of another season. I'm sure we'll do it all year long. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great day.